was 1974 before a woman could have a credit card in her own name.
Tradwives are absolutely looking back to the 1950s with rose-colored glasses. Women in the 1950s were being so oppressed by both society, their husbands. The Tradwife movement is essentially prescribing that men should be the dominant force in the home and that women are to be homemakers and subservient to them in almost every matter.
When I was younger, I grew up in a traditional Indian community, and there were both housewives and career women in these families, and they always said how accepted and appreciated both housewives and career women are in India. I've also nannied for quite a few Indian families, and they've all said the same thing. So what is it about the West that wants to devalue traditional wives?
Okay, well, that was Esty. She's married to her husband, Connor. They've been married now for about a year. She's embraced the role that's referred to now, on the internet at least, as a tradwife. Maybe a new term, an old trend, very traditional. It's been around for thousands of years, and not a bad thing, it's just a little different than we see today. Just 5% of children were born to single mothers in 1960. Today, that number is 46%. It's a debate many women are having on whether it's a trend that should stay or go. Now, Neha says that she doesn't like this new trend. She says tradwives are looking back to the 1950s with rose-colored glasses and romanticizing a time that really wasn't so great for women.
Tradwives on social media are selling a huge lie. Tradwives say that the woman's place is in the home as a homemaker, but what tradwives are actually doing by producing all of this high-quality social media content is working, is generating income, and that's disingenuous to their followers. The Tradwife movement is essentially prescribing that men should be the dominant force in the home and that women are to be homemakers and subservient to them in almost every matter. I don't think that there is any beauty in second-class citizenship. Tradwives are absolutely looking back to the 1950s with rose-colored glasses. Women in the 1950s were being so oppressed by both society, their husbands, themselves, and that's the reason so many women were miserable and self-medicating. So it's calling back to a time where someone like me would have a hard time existing in society. In many other cultures, traditional gender roles are very present, but what goes along with that are high rates of domestic violence, financial control, and the inability for the woman to really be able to live her truth.
If he says no and puts his foot down, then the answer is no.
The Tradwife movement is a huge affront to all of the hard work that women and even lots of men have been doing for decades in order to get women equal rights.
Well, thanks for being here. Not a big fan of tradwives.
Not the biggest fan of tradwives, no.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to be a wife and a mother and stay at home and even embracing traditional gender roles, but there is something very dangerous in women being beholden to those gender roles because across different cultures where there is more adherence to traditional gender roles, there are higher rates of sexual abuse, sexual violence, domestic violence, and financial abuse. And I think tradwife culture is kind of an affront to all of the really hard work that advocates and activists have been doing for the last 50, 60, 70 years.
We talked about that a little bit, and I actually made a list of some of those things because some of this has happened so much more recently than people realize. It was 1839, they could have marital assets. 1916, women elected to Congress for the first time. 1920, 19th Amendment to ratify the vote started. In 1948, enlisted in the Air Force. It wasn't until 1963 that the Equal Pay Act, in theory, abolished disparity in wages, in theory. It was 1974 before a woman could have a credit card in her own name. Then Supreme Court Justice in 81, 83, American woman was in space. 97, woman Secretary of State. So these things have just been coming on just within this generation. So some of this stuff is hard fought and recently won.
That's right, yeah. The thing that jumps out to me as being the most problematic is that, to have a platform and monetize such a big platform and be spreading a message that women should be second-class citizens in their own homes and be submissive and subservient, and then that is sort of the natural social and biological order, I think that's extremely harmful, and it's also just not true.
And you say that's not how people should look at that. That it's not a second-class citizen.
Correct. I disagree because the idea that, separate but equal, the last time we heard the argument of separate but equal as a social framework was during Jim Crow. So there is no space in a contemporary and modern society for separate but equal. That's just my opinion.
Pew Research did a study recently that asked people what they value in the different sexes. And it was an anonymous survey so people could actually be honest about this. And I was really surprised at what they saw. They said, what traits or characteristics do you think people in our society value most? And in men, number one was honesty and morality, 33%. And then 23% was second, professional and financial success, ambition, leadership, strength, toughness, hard work, good. With women, number one was physical attractiveness. And at the top over here was honest and morality. Over here, it was all the way down to number 4 at 14%. So this battle's still going on, right?
The battle's still going on, and what I think is interesting is that instead of relying on an adherence to what this data is showing, my point is that, we should be challenging the social conditions that allow for this data to be the way it is in the first place.
Yeah, and you think Tradwife just plays into this?
I think it reinforces it, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
It is not uncommon for traditional wives to supplement their husband's income. The key word here is supplement the husband's income. It's not going to be enough to obviously live off of, but it can help. So while we may supplement our husband's income, it does not come before our home, our family. That is our number one priority.
Well, that was Esty. She has over 150,000 followers and growing. She says she's making some money as a content creator. Does that go against the Tradwife movement? Now, some say it does. Now, Neha says that she isn't the only woman who thinks this movement is setting women back to a time when they had much fewer rights. Now, Allie is a conservative Christian commentator, author, speaker, and podcast host. And Mara oversees 500 employees, including her husband. Both women say the Tradwife movement, well, it's just not for them. Allie, you've been listening to everything we've been talking about. What's jumping out at you?
Yeah, so I am a conservative Christian, and I do believe in traditional gender roles as defined by the Bible, and I do work outside the home. So I guess maybe you would categorize me somewhere in between sourdough starter and girl boss. And yes, at the end of the day, my husband is the head of our household. He is the leader of our family. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to those big decisions and when push comes to shove, he's the one that takes the lead. Mm-hmm.
And do you feel second class because of that?
Not at all, not at all. My husband loves me and respects me very well. And he actually is, we work together, so he's kind of my business manager. And he has always been immensely supportive of what I do. He would probably say that's part of why he fell in love with me. And so we just work well together.
Yeah. Laura, what's your take on all of this?
My take is a lot different. I come from a home where I was raised by a single mom. So I watched my mom take over the household. In fact, my father died when I was 6 years old. So if I had to ask you a question before I continue answering yours, my question for you would be, what would happen, heaven forbid, your husband wasn't there, whether you got divorced or he died, then what happens? Would you be able to upkeep the household? I mean, where would that leave you?
I believe that no matter if you are a traditional wife or a modern woman with a career, if your husband were to pass away, everything goes to scrap, and you have to start over no matter what. Like, if you were if your home was depending on 2 incomes, you would still have to sell your home. You would still have to figure it out. So no matter what, I do believe that there is a change that's going to happen, and a huge change. But in terms of traditional marriage, a lot of women would go back to their under their father's roof, their family's, their biological parents' roof, and figure it out from there. I'm not incapable of course, making money. Obviously, I did not finish my college degree, so I don't have a degree. I don't have much work experience besides nannying, which obviously I guess is not super applicable, but I would figure it out and I would pray, and the Lord has a purpose no matter what happens to you.
Right, that's interesting, yeah. So for me, right, I do believe in God. I have the same pretty much traditional values, but in my case, you know, I feel like being a businesswoman is only a part of who I am. It doesn't define me. So being a housewife, like, while I respect all of that, I also feel like, for me, I need to be happy with me in order to maintain a happy life, right? So a lot of that includes, yes, I tend to my husband, but you know what? My husband also tends to me. We do it together. My husband doesn't always take the lead. I am his boss at work. But you know what? I feel like a marriage is a partnership, and when we do it together, we have double the results. It's not just one relying on the other, but really relying on each other to encompass an entire life together. So a little different from the way that you're brought up. And on your Instagram, you talk about society and pushing independence on young children. So my question to you is, this ideology that you have, is this something that you would, if you have a daughter, is that something that you would press upon your daughter to become a Tradwife, or would you be supportive as to whatever she chose to do?
I would definitely want my daughter to prioritize her family, her home, her husband above all else. I would want to instill confidence so that she could choose the right husband, because that ultimately is the most important thing in this lifestyle, is marrying the right man and understanding your man's character before you marry. But I believe that a lot of women do have rose-colored glasses on when they're dating, and then when they get married, this is when they have this crisis of, who did I marry? What is gonna happen? And they believe in a backup plan, and they don't have that confidence within their marriage.
Yeah,
and
getting papers on him doesn't change him. Trust me.
My name is Austin, and I support the Tradwife Movement. I think traditional wives are pillars of the family unit and the community, and I would love to one day be able to provide the means and space to have that role in my household. The main reasoning is, I think raising a family is an art form and is a hard job and time well spent. Nothing against dual income households, but I think about that extra 40 hours a week that can be spent on local communities, on your family, on raising children, which is a very difficult job. And like I said, it's time well spent that I think I would love to have a part of my family unit in the future.
Well, that was Austin, who's traveling the world in search of the perfect Tradwife. So since he's traveling the world, he's joining us virtually from the Philippines.
Hey, Dr. Phil.
What kind of wife you looking for?
Well, you get the traditional wife. I think there's a spectrum, right? I think you can take the most extreme version of a traditional wife, or someone who's not, and I think it's in the middle. I think you're allowed to choose a spectrum and be flexible. I don't think it has to be as extreme or extremist as people wanted to say.
So you say your love life has blossomed outside the U.S.?
Absolutely, yeah. I think after the pandemic, I was able to work remote, and I started traveling the world. I started in Colombia. I got to go with my family to Spain, Mexico, Korea, the Philippines, Vietnam, and I was single at the time, so there's dating apps now. I got on Tinder and I started meeting up with locals because I thought, who knows the culture better, and they were able to show me amazing places around the world, and I was able to meet a ton of people, make a ton of friends, and now I'm in a long-term relationship.
Oh, so you've got somebody that you're serious about?
Yeah, I have someone that I'm serious about now.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll watch how this goes along.